because transformation is not just a logical process, it's an emotional journey, and every change initiative impacts the emotional and mental well-being of our people. And recognizing and validating those emotions that come up during this is essential. This is why leaders have to create an environment where people feel really safe to express what they're worried about, their concerns, without fear of retaliation, retribution, or looking stupid. I want to close this section now by saying that emotions can be a really powerful driver of transformation, right? Harnessing positive ones like enthusiasm and hope can fuel momentum. For example, P&G, Procter & Gamble, as you know, very large FMCG company, they used emotional storytelling to drive their purpose, values, and principles initiative. So this approach resonated deeply with its employees, aligning their personal values with the organizational ones. So even so-called negative emotions like anger and frustration, they can be used. They can be used to create the urgency for a new way of doing things, right? Increasing that hunger for a better future. So understanding and addressing the emotional landscape of transformation is not just beneficial, it's really essential. You see, they're not scared of the F word. They're aware, they're conscious. They realize they hadn't paid enough attention to how their people are feeling and how those feelings directly influence behavior. All of us, myself included, we often underestimate the role of emotions in accelerating or annihilating transformation. We spend a lot of time on speeds and feeds, on profits and purpose, when we really should be normalizing the dialogue around feelings and fears. Hi guys, welcome back to Future Fit with Friska. Today we're diving deep into a crucial yet often overlooked aspect of transformation, and that is the F word, feelings. We're going to be talking about the emotional landscape. Understanding and addressing both personal and collective emotions in the workplace is vital for successful change. So let's explore how feelings actually influence transformation and how we can harness them effectively. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sick and tired of decision makers bagging change management, the 70% failure rate. Yet, they don't change. They continue what they've been doing for many, many years. So I'm here to tell you today that if you want unconventional results, if you want to buck that failure rate, then you can't take the conventional approach. It really is time to flip the script. So you may remember in a previous episode, I talked about how to intentionally curate your people stack, about the 4 archetypes in organizations, right? You may remember the nostalgia seekers, the reflexive skeptics, frustrated enthusiasts, and the holy grail change makers. So I'm sure you're all listening today and all of you know a nostalgia seeker, someone who can only see things from a lens of the past, who longs for the simple times, who grew up analog first and wants everything to be IRL. So the reason nostalgia seekers resist so feverishly is because we are not addressing their feelings underneath, right? Nostalgia seekers, as do all of us, we fear loss, but they have a greater fear because their sources of power, prestige, protection, performance, pay, and position are all under threat. So usually in organizational transformations, we don't take the time to unearth and address these fears and feelings. And when we embark on large-scale transformations without equal, actually I'd argue we need to put more effort towards the emotional shifts that come with it. It's like the equivalent of putting a little old granny in a powerful new Ferrari, right? Its full capabilities won't be used. She'll be shifting those tectonic gears at the pace of tectonic plates pushing together, probably toddling down the Autobahn like it's a school zone. So future fit organizations do things a little bit differently. You see, they're not scared of the F word. They're aware, they're conscious. They realize they hadn't paid enough attention to how their people are feeling and how those feelings directly influence behavior. All of us, myself included, we often underestimate the role of emotions in accelerating or annihilating transformation. We spend a lot of time on speeds and feeds, on profits and purpose, when we really should be normalizing the dialogue around feelings and fears. Emotions are rarely talked about, taboo even, especially in Asia where I'm based today, but they have a significant impact on our daily interactions. 99% of organizations are taking the conventional approach. They ignore emotions altogether. They spend a lot of time on values, right? Thinking about them, articulating them, deciding on them, trying to commit to them. But let me ask you, what shapes values, right? There are things that actually come before values, and they are beliefs and perceptions, right? And what influences them? What influences beliefs and perceptions? You'll notice that it all starts with emotions. They shape our relationships, they influence our decisions, and they color our working experiences. So with so many organizations defaulting to convention, is it any wonder we have such a low transformation success rate, right? And if we want something different, we need to do something different. So let me ask you, as leaders, how much time do you spend understanding and managing your own emotions, let alone recognizing and empathizing with the emotions of others? So let's play a quick game to illustrate my point. Our success relies on our people feeling this. Now, there'll be some emotion cards that pop up on the screen right now, so I want you to have a think about and select your top 2. Have a think about your organization, what it's trying to achieve. What are the CSFs, not critical success factors, but what are those critical success feelings that will enable it to happen? Now think of why you chose those cards, right? Now let's move on to the next step. So again, some emotional cards are going to be projected on the screen. Now I want you to answer this question. I know our people are feeling this if I see or hear what? So for example, if you chose secure, how do you know your people are feeling secure? What are they saying, right? What are you hearing among the corridors? So again, I'm going to let you have a few minutes to select your questions. You may pause at this point and you'll see the emotions on the screen, and come back to me when you're done. Now, the next question is, to help our people feel X, I will need to do what? Right? That's why you're in a leadership position. So what are you going to do differently to cultivate more of these desired emotions? Take a note of your actions that you're going to commit to. So what insight has this short exercise given you? I've run this exercise many times, both in person and remote, in many different countries around the world. And many of the insights shared are that, sadness in one country looks very different to sadness in another. And often people haven't thought about it. They haven't thought about what joy looks like, for example, in their organization, or enthusiasm. And the critical success feelings are widely different. So let me ask you, before we came together and thought about this, have you reflected on these kinds of questions before? Most of the time, the answer is no. So you see, if we're not intentional with cultivating the emotional culture within our organizations, how could we possibly create future fit organizations? Because transformation is not just a logical process, it's an emotional journey. And every change initiative impacts the emotional and mental well-being of our people. And recognizing and validating those emotions that come up during this is essential. This is why leaders have to create an environment where people feel really safe to express what they're worried about, their concerns, without fear of retaliation, retribution, or looking stupid. Let's talk about recognizing and validating emotions, right? We have to understand first the different emotions employees might experience during change. Fear, anxiety, hope, these are all very common emotions. So validating these means you acknowledge them without judging them. So this builds trust and encourages open communication. If you want a more effective transition, then this is a core skill you need to learn, regardless whether you're a leader or not. You need to recognize and validate people's feelings. However, this is often overlooked or poorly managed. Many leaders focus heavily on the technical, systemic, or procedural aspects of change, neglecting the human side. And what does this mean? This leads to resistance. This leads to decreased morale and ultimately failure. So I'll be even more clear, right? Here's why recognizing and validating emotions is important. Number one, it builds trust. Employees are more likely to trust leaders who acknowledge their feelings and concerns. Number two, validating emotions can help reduce resistance to change by helping employees feel more heard and more understood. Number three, it enhances engagement. When employees feel their emotions are acknowledged, they're more likely to be engaged and committed to the change process. Number four, it promotes well-being. Right? Addressing emotions can improve everybody's well-being, reducing stress and burnout. Workplace stress literally costs Australian employers $14 billion a year in lost productivity and sick leave. What do you think it's costing your organization? And last but not least, number five, it improves communication. Openly discussing emotions can enhance communication between leaders, managers, and employees, fostering a more supportive environment. And when we think during our lifetimes, we spend 80,000 hours at work, this is just the smart thing to do and the right thing to do to make everyone feel at ease. So now that you know that, you may be wondering, where do we start? What are the first steps? So I've observed some amazing leaders during my time. So here's 5 tips on how to recognize and validate emotions during transformation. Are you leading change but constantly running into a brick wall of resistance? Maybe you've huffed and puffed, yet still not blown the house down. You are not alone. Resistance to change is one of the biggest roadblocks that leaders face, but it doesn't have to be. Imagine turning that resistance into momentum which drives you forward. That's exactly what my free 5-part mini course will help you do. It's called Shifting Resistance into Resilience, and in just 5 lessons, I'll walk you through proven strategies to break down those walls. You'll learn how to identify the root causes of resistance, engage your key stakeholders, yes, even the stubborn and loud ones, and build a culture that doesn't fatigue with change. It actually feasts on it. Sound good? All you need to do is click the link to get started, and the first lesson will be in your inbox. Don't let resistance render you powerless. Turn it into resilience that will push you forward. Right? First, very important, active listening. This means fully concentrating, understanding, and responding thoughtfully to what the other person is saying. Responding not to deny, deflect, or defend, but responding to show understanding. It shows your people that you value their input and care about their experiences. How do you do it? It sounds really obvious, but it's very hard. You need to give your people your full attention. So avoid interrupting, reflect back what you've just heard to show understanding, right? Using phrases like, I hear you, I understand how you feel, or I can see you might feel like that. We are living in a very distracted, information overload world, so doing active listening is harder than it sounds. You really need to concentrate. Number 2, acknowledge and name emotions. Right? Recognizing and naming emotions helps employees feel seen and understood. It validates their experiences. It opens the door for more real, in-depth conversations about their worries and fears. Use statements like, I can see you're feeling frustrated. Is that right? Or, it sounds like this change is causing you some anxiety. And even, you seem angry. Can you help me understand why? So this helps employees feel that their emotions are legitimate and valid. Honestly, this doesn't come naturally to a lot of people, myself included. So I find using props such as feeling cards or images works really, really well. I don't know about you, but it quite annoys me and it intimidates me when someone asks, tell me what you're feeling right now. It actually feels quite invasive and I get defensive. I feel like I'm being watched and observed. But if someone showed me different images and said, which three describe what's going on for you right now, it feels like I'm not being judged, and it invites a more exploratory dialogue. Number 3, we need to create safe spaces for expression, right? Providing a safe environment for people to express their emotions without being judged or any repercussions, it means they're more likely to be open and to do it more and more. So how do we do this? We can set up regular check-ins, one-on-one meetings, team forums, where employees can share their feelings, and be cognizant that sharing this sort of information may be very unnatural for some people. So you need to think about what anonymous methods of checking in can you integrate so everyone can participate. This is especially important in Asian countries. Number 4, empathize and share experiences. So empathy bridges the gap between leaders and employees, showing that leaders are also human and can relate to their experiences. So this means going first. Share your own experiences with change and how it made you feel. Use empathetic statements like, I felt overwhelmed during changes before, and I understand how challenging this can be. What can I do to help? But actually go into detail when you face these challenges. Don't just make general motherhood statements and think that's enough. Remember, we're human beings, not human doings. We love stories, right? Tell us yours. Show us you're real and that you can be happy, hurt, angry, and sad too, just like everyone else. Believe it or not, and remember this, perfection inhibits connection, right? Perfection inhibits connection. And conversely, imperfection actually supercharges connection because it's just so darn relatable. Number 5, provide support and resources, right? Offering support and resources allows employees to feel like their well-being is a priority and that you and the organization is committed to helping them through this difficult period, right? You can't expect people to suddenly be verbose about their feelings and fears if they've never been taught how to have these conversations. There's a learning curve for everything and everyone. So the earlier resources are provided, the earlier you can stop dancing around the F word. This could be access to counseling services, well-being apps, stress management workshops, training programs to help people cope with the emotional roller coaster that change brings. So ensure your people know how to find these resources and encourage their use, and make sure that they're easy to get, regardless of where people are located or their personal situation, right? There's no point announcing that you have some emotional development workshops if they're only in one city, if they're cost prohibitive, or if they're not available online. So by incorporating these strategies, you can create a more supportive and understanding environment during times of transformation. And what does this do? It means you're going to get a more resilient and adaptable workforce. Here's a perfect example of someone that did this. I don't know if you've heard of Alan Mulally. So he transformed Ford Motor Company. He took over its CEO in 2006. When he did that, Ford wasn't great. They were struggling, losing billions and billions of dollars, facing a rapidly changing automotive industry. So Mulally recognized that the company needed not just a new strategy, but a new culture, a complete overhaul. So he introduced a new concept called One Ford, and it aimed to unify the company's often siloed divisions and foster a culture of teamwork and transparency. He placed a strong emphasis on emotional intelligence, understanding that change can't happen if you don't address the underlying fears and concerns of your people. He introduced weekly meetings where leaders were encouraged to be transparent about their challenges and to support each other in solving them. This cultural shift helped break down barriers within the organization and instilled a sense of shared responsibility. The results? Incredible. Ford not only avoided bankruptcy without the government bailouts that its competitors needed, but also returned to profitability and became a leader in innovation. They created models such as the Ford Fusion Hybrid, the Ford F-150. They became industry benchmarks. His focus on a cultural transformation and emotional alignment was critical to Ford's comeback. This demonstrates how addressing the human side of change leads to incredible business results. right? We can't be surprised. Gallup, one of those the well-known human capital research organizations, they found employees who felt their emotions were acknowledged and validated, they're 67% more engaged and productive. So if you ignore emotions, it leads to resistance, disengagement, and failure of the change. But for emotions to come onto center stage, we have to first create a safe environment for emotional expression. We as leaders need to learn techniques for managing emotions before we can role model them for others. Right? It's the same logic as put your own oxygen mask on first. So we weren't taught emotional intelligence in schools. So we are students as much as anyone else. So at this point, I'm not going to tell you to suggest meditating or walking in nature, right? That's pretty naff. Instead, here are 3 dynamic approaches that are really effective, particularly if you're a leader in a global organization, right? The first is cognitive reframing of the strategic narrative. So this means shifting the perception on a situation by consciously reinterpreting it within the context of a larger strategic initiative. So as a leader, when faced with a challenging emotion, consider the broader story of your organization's journey, your role within it, and how this moment of adversity contributes to the overall mission. In other words, think bigger picture. By aligning what you're feeling with the strategic direction of the company, you create a narrative that repositions stress and anxiety as actually necessary, critical building blocks that lead to progress. And this helps reduce their intensity and impact. The second, and I'm a huge fan of this, is an emotional debriefing with a trusted confidant. So instead of bottling up inside, internalizing complex emotions, you need to engage in regular structured debriefs with someone you trust, maybe an advisor or a peer. I'd argue women have been doing this for centuries. So this practice allows for the externalization of emotions safely. This gives you greater emotional clarity. If you verbalize the challenges and the emotions, you gain new insights, you reduce that mental burden, and you actually improve your decision-making. These debriefs can also deepen trust and professional relationships, and this means it builds your emotional resilience over time. Last but not least, emotional agility through scenario planning. Leaders, as much as everyone else, face a lot of uncertainty, and this can heighten emotions. It can make us really anxious because we don't know what to do, because we don't know what's coming. A technique to manage this is to engage in scenario planning. This is where you literally imagine various future scenarios, both positive and negative, and then you develop responses to each one. This was created by Shell, and if it worked for them, it can work for you. This exercise not only prepares you for potential challenges, but also helps you manage anticipatory emotions. When you do this, you can maintain that emotional flexibility and you can be more proactive rather than reactive, even in highly stressful situations, because you've thought about it and you've imagined how you're going to respond to it. I want to close this section now by saying that emotions can be a really powerful driver of transformation, right? Harnessing positive ones like enthusiasm and hope can fuel momentum. For example, P&G, Procter & Gamble, as you know, very large FMCG company, they used emotional storytelling to drive their purpose, values, and principles initiative. So this approach resonated deeply with its employees, aligning their personal values with the organizational ones. So even so-called negative emotions like anger and frustration, they can be used. They can be used to create the urgency for a new way of doing things, right? Increasing that hunger for a better future. So understanding and addressing the emotional landscape of transformation is not just beneficial, it's really essential. If you create an environment where emotions are acknowledged and managed, you can drive change, lead change, embed change more effectively, right? The Future Fit organization is very much a feeling organization. Thank you for joining me on yet another episode of Future Fit with Friska. And remember, cold water doesn't get any warmer if you wait to jump in. Just go for it. Start learning, start practicing, and start changing. See you next time.